Can you tell me what that amendment is and how that fits into this conversation?
Sure, I think Mr. Allen can, because you may also notice that there are a lot of other amendments posted.
Yeah, but that one came on while we were here.
Go ahead.
I believe, and I don't
Paperwork issue.
have the 21 in front of me, but I think a RR was added somewhere on page 66. If somebody has that, they can find that. And that language refers to realtors. We have language in here that gets at this notion. I tend to think of it as flow-through income, where one business, they're doing their business and they collect some money on behalf of a customer, but they're kind of a flow-through entity. So they're just passing that money along. And we have generic language that clarifies that those dollars aren't part of their commercial activity, so it's not part of the tax base. There were concerns, I think, by the realtors, and that language is added to call them out specifically. I actually haven't seen that exactly. Or is it? Or is it QQ? Yeah. Okay, QQ, not RR.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you for that. So I'm under the impression there's still amending going on. Okay, thank you for that. So, another question? Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. So on page 61, above section 58, there's the phrase corporate activity tax. And then in line 27, it defines commercial activity. And then as I go through that section, unless I missed it, I don't see the word corporate anywhere else. So I'm wondering, and we keep referring to a commercial activity tax. Can you tell me why the word corporate is there instead of commercial?
Yeah, this has been the name, we've been struggling with the naming of the tax and how to name the tax base, because part of the intent is to be very clear that it's not an income tax. So prior versions, we had business receipts, and then it got changed to commercial activity. And at one point in the sub-revenue committee, a lot of this, it was called the commercial activities tax. And I believe that's what Ohio calls theirs. So I think there's just been a lot of debate around what that name should be and who bears the burden of the tax. In looking at it, a lot of the sales that are expected to be in the tax base and remitting the tax are corporations, C corporations in particular, but some S corporations as well. So that would be my best guess as to why it's still called the corporate activity tax in terms of who we expect to bear the burden of the tax.
Please. So will only corporations pay this tax?
No, the tax applies to all businesses. It doesn't matter the structure. And that was one of the discussions about kind of getting back at adding stability as having a broad base and broad tax. So it applies to all entities that meet those thresholds. And some of the numbers I was providing before in response to Senator Taylor's question, a lot of those businesses that aren't paying the tax are the sole proprietors. They're still subject to it. So if they have more than $1 million in commercial activity, they'll be subject to it. And there are some sole proprietors that meet that threshold and we expect would be remitting the tax.
Yeah. So I would, since we're still in an amendment process, I would respectfully request that would be changed to commercial, because it makes it sound like only corporations are receiving this tax or paying this tax. And indeed, it's not just corporations. We think of big corporations. It's different structures in business that do that. So I would respectfully ask that we amend that to commercial and get rid of corporate, since commercial has been nailed down here, it looks like.
You can submit that request.
Thank you. And one last follow-up. So if there was a ballot initiative as a result of this bill, would language from this bill be used in the ballot writing process or the ballot title process or anything like that?
Co-chairs, Representative Sprenger, In the ballot title writing process, yes, it would be, and there would be most likely some level of review by the Oregon Supreme Court to clarify and verify that the ballot title actually not only reflected what was in the measure, but also clearly expressed that to the voters. So as the process moves along, clearly once a court looks at it, the ballot title needs to reflect what's in the measure in a way that it is understandable to voters. And if I could just add one point about the caption on page 61, where it says corporate activity tax, and we actually have language at the end of the bill in section 83 making clear that, and this is standard language boilerplate that we use, that unit and section captions are not, they don't become part of the law, and they also don't express legislative intent. Typically in legislative counsel, we only use them in bills that have, I would say, at least 10 or 20 sections, and they're mostly a roadmap for the reader to be able to find the sections. And again, the same thing with the lead lines that are next to the section numbers, the underlined language looks like the lead lines that we have when we compile the statutes. Those also would not become part of the law if the bill were to be enacted. Those are there basically as roadmaps for the reader.
Follow up, not really, just a final comment on that. Very respectfully, Madam Co-Chair, I find it interesting that caption there is corporate activity tax when we're talking about commercial activity tax, and this could relate to ballot title language. So I will be submitting an amendment to change that language.
Thank you. Representative Smith.